Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Canadian Pot Cow. I'm Sarah Sash, and here today again, as always, with my fabulous co-host, Andrew Campbell. Today we're continuing our two-part series on proteins. In the first episode, we looked at why protein has become one of the biggest trends in the food industry, how it's shaping consumer choices, and what it means for Canadian dairy producers navigating this shift on their farms. In this second episode, we'll go further. We're going to talk with experts about the opportunities protein presents for dairy producers and the strategies the industry can use to respond to changing consumer demand. By the end of the episode, hopefully we'll have a clearer understanding of not just the why behind the protein trend, but how the dairy sector can capitalize on it. Coming right up on the Canadian Pot Cow.
To help us unpack that, we're joined by three expert guests from Lactanet, bringing very different perspectives. We have Simon Jeter-Nantel, economist and team leader, technical expertise. Simon, welcome.
Thank you.
Rodrigo Milano is a dairy production expert, rearing and nutrition, and team leader as well. Rodrigo, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us on.
And joining as well, Cindy Jeton, Director of Genetics and Traceability. Cindy, welcome to the Canadian Pot Cow.
Thank you very much.
So let's ease into this, team. There's a lot of chatter about protein these days. Some people would call it a protein craze, and we're super grateful to have all of you on to talk about what that means to you from your perspective as it pertains to the dairy industry. So we'll start with you, Simon.
Basically, what it means is that we need to adapt. We need to adapt to the market and consumers. As you say, they've shifted, and so basically, we need to align our production with it. In a way, we're kind of lucky that marketing is centralized. We have central agencies doing it, but they're sending us a clear signal that that adjustment has to take place on the farm. And basically, those that can adapt will be rewarded.
Yep, those signals are real clear. Cindy, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to bring today, more of a genetics perspective, is that we need to be careful, and genetics cannot adapt to these changes right away. So we're going to need to have a longer term vision and strategy for tackling this in the future.
And Rodrigo, I know we've had you on to talk about heifer inventory before. So what are your thoughts here?
Well, this time probably I'm going to touch a little bit less on the heifer side, but definitely a little bit more on the protein side, maybe on the nutrition. Even like when this demand is sourcing from our human nutrition, right? We're trying. I think this is part of the us as consumers trying to move away for ultra-processed, rich sugar diets, and while we control also our consumption of fat. So I think protein has become an obvious option for many. In the recent past, we have been also seeing a constant increment in the demand for butter fat. So I think now is the turn of dairy protein. So I think we should be all excited, at least in the sector, that the different forms of dairy are more and more present in our dinner tables, and hopefully we can capitalize on that.
Does that match what you're seeing on farms today, though, Rodrigo? Like in terms of the rise in protein demand, does that hype feel real immediate on farm, or is it more market hype at this point?
Well, I think we were all skeptic a little bit. I think we've been hearing about this increase in protein demand since 2025. Actually, we got an update in the milk price structure early in January 2026, but I think we haven't really probably all bought on it. Probably we have had some conversations, but nothing that necessarily sparked any real actions. But now with this new policy that came into effect April 1st, I think we got, Simon was saying, a clear signal that there is a sustained protein demand from consumers, and they're actually ready to pay for it. So as a consequence, I think now across Canada, all dairy farms are definitely looking into different ways to meet that demand and get the opportunity, the economic opportunity that we have on that.
Which is very exciting because certainly in, as we come out of winter meeting season, I think as producers, we've all seen those numbers to see what very impressive demand there has been. I think the challenge, certainly that I see, and this is kind of directed to you, Cindy, is that, since I started farming, the thing that I have focused entirely genetically is butterfat. Like when I look down that sire chart, that deviation, one of our conditions is the deviation has to be positive on butterfat. And it would appear that everyone else has done that too, because from a genetic standpoint, from a breeding perspective, that's where we are. Do you think Canadian herds are positioned from a breeding perspective to be able to respond to this shift, Cindy?
I think it's gonna vary by breed. Some breeds will have it easier than others. But generally, the two traits are still connected together. So as you've been selecting for increasing fat, you've also increased protein. The issue that we are in right now and the trends we are seeing in the last 5 years that they've not increased at the same rate, whereas in the past they were either increasing at the same rate or even protein was increasing a little bit faster than fat. But in the last 5 years for the Holstein breed, for example, fat has been increasing 1.2 times faster than protein. In the Jersey breed, that's 1.4 times faster. So, you can see the struggle. And this is also for genetically, it's also animals that are not yet in the milking herds. So the choice you've been making in the last 5 years are not yet fully into your bulk tank. And even the semen that you still have in your tank might have been selected based on the deviation of fat that you're referring to. So we're gonna see this trend continuing in the next little bit until the genetic decision you're taking now will start to affect, but it's gonna be a long-term impact, and it's gonna vary from herd to herd as well. So some producer will have, for some of them, they may have been lucky in a way that the high fat bull that they selected also were high for protein, and in other cases that might not be the case. So we'll need a combination of management here to help us tackle the short-term challenge, let's say.
Yeah, for sure. We'll stick with you for a minute, Cindy. We spent almost a decade, I would say, selecting for butterfat. And to your point, nobody even has high protein bulls exclusively in their tanks at this point. You can't just switch it back 10 years and be like, oh, I'd like to get that bull that I used to use. So how much has that shaped the cows we're working with today and the genetic potential that we have to respond to something like this in terms of what we're doing on the farm?
These curves of fat and protein have been diverging, and now we want to bring them back. So it's going to be a longer term solution. So on a day-to-day, starting to select bulls that are higher for protein, but still when we did meet with the Canadian Dairy Commission to talk about this, and the message was clear from them. We need to adjust, but we don't want to do a full 180 and just go straight to protein and not care about fat at all. So I think it still needs to be a balance, but maybe start to look at that deviation for protein a little bit more and start looking at those kilograms of protein for the bulls, but also for the females, because the two sides will help you get there faster.
Because Simon, I think, if I think back to the picture I always have in my head is that Time magazine article that said butter fat is in and butter's so impressive, and that was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years ago now, and it really delivered this butter fat boom. From an economics perspective, I mean, and really we got to where we are in butterfat because of that boom. Is there a lesson we can learn over the last decade in terms of growth in butterfat in, from the economic perspective, and how we can apply this to this, increase this really thriving demand for protein?
Sure. I mean, the basic lesson is one where, producers can adapt if you show them the dollar sign, and they will adapt, just like most other economic agents out there. So we can adapt. So that's the good thing, obviously. And a little bit like what Cindy was saying, adaptation tends to take time. So in the very short run, we tend to have a much shorter menu of solutions. And as time expands, then the menu of solution and the amplitude of the adaptation, or the ease of adaptation, will expand. Or if you want to frame it another way, the cost of adapting over the next month would be huge. I mean, you can always think of selling your entire herd and buying new genetics, but that's not really pragmatic. So the economically feasible solution in the short term are much less than what they will be on a 3, 4, 5, 6 years time frame. And I think that's part of what we've seen also, because if you look at the change in butter fat, at least in the last few years, you've seen even more. The rate of increase was even more, and that's a little bit of what we need to kind of curb down a little bit. But it's in part because basically all the tools were now working. The genetic, the management, feed, and everything was working together to make that fat happen and hit the market. And that's a little bit where we're like, whoa, that was maybe a little bit unexpected from our marketing agencies. And then on top of that, you have the consumers that turned around on protein. But overall, I think we can adapt. We will. Slower in the short term, but yes.
So that's what I was going to ask next. And to Rodrigo is, are we doing this? So do you see farms managing as if butterfat is still the main benchmark, even though the pricing signals are shifting? Or where are we at here in, I don't know, I guess it's April of 2026. What's kind of the point right now and where are we going?
Well, I think definitely just because how our quota system is structured, butterfat is still one of the main benchmarks in terms of producing kgs of butterfat per day. But now these new price structure and the new demand for protein is changing, is adding an extra consideration there, is we have to deliver as much protein as possible per every kg of butterfat delivered. So I think, again, the main, the ultimate goal still is making our quota, but now we just have to bring some protein with it in an increasing rate.
Well, and I think it's one of those things that when we do look at trying to bring that protein, to the market, here for me in Ontario and the P5, that pricing structure has changed. It's changing in the West, differently, but changing as well. Can you boil down? Do you think that this pricing structure, this model, is going to actually work, Simon? What do you think we're really trying to nudge the producer to do? Because there's increasing protein sounds like one thing, but we'd have the same result if we brought the butter fat down and just pushed volume too, wouldn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. And so basically, I mean, the good thing to do is to look at all those different options, whether it's increasing protein or reducing fat. But I think basically what we need is to take off, like a little bit like what you were saying, Andrew, when selecting bulls and all that. You had your glasses that were looking specifically at fat, and a lot of people, whether it's feeding strategies or anything, we were focused on fat. Now it's to say, like, can I replace some of those strategies, whether it's on the genetic side, nutrition, or herd management side? Can I replace those strategies with strategies that would increase protein? Is it feasible to just increase protein? Might be hard, but at least increase both instead of just increasing fat. So I think that's the switch that we need to do. Take off our fat goggles if we want, and just put on like protein and fat at the same time.
Yeah, I definitely hear a lot of that these are both very important components of milk, and maybe trying to balance them, promote one over the other is not the long-term way forward for us. So Cindy, in terms of herds starting with a lower S&F ratio, is genetics a true limiting factor, or can the environment compensate more than people think for this?
To some extent, you're a little bit stuck with what you've decided some years ago. However, the management can play a role, and I think my colleagues here are probably more knowledgeable than me on that side, but the nutritionists have found different ways to be able to make mainly the fat vary a lot. For protein, it seemed more difficult and costly. That's why I think we need to keep that in mind in our decision genetically also for the future. But yeah, in the short term, genetically, it will be difficult to make any changes unless you want to do like Simon says and go buy other animals in to build your herd on. But yeah, it's going to be difficult.
So the genetics is going to take time. Rodrigo, let's talk about day to day then in terms of management. Like, what can we do as producers to shift this a little bit so that we can move that S&F ratio a little higher into a more profitable range?
Well, I think that will depend on what's your departing point, and bringing to what what Cynthia was saying, depending on genetics, etc. I remember when the conditions was the opposite, that we wanted like a lower SNF to F ratio. Some wholesale herds were saying, well, probably we're going to buy some jerseys out. So I don't know if the opposite will play around this time, but definitely, as you were mentioning, Andrew, one of the things, we always have the potential to increase protein percentage, but ideally we will also increase our protein yield, but also increasing volume and decreasing the ratio, but decreasing body fat. Again, that depends. That's specific to the farm reality. What is the first strategy of how to do about it and how to go about it? Because it's complex, and it's we've been trying to think around the different strategies. There is tons of strategies, but which ones start first, it really depends to your farms. But definitely there is nutritional strategies that can put into place. Milking frequency, that's only on in terms of increasing the volume. Taking probably a closer look into your transition cow strategy. That's probably one of the easiest ones to go and look into having higher peaks and better lactations. So again, I think this protein yield demand, is going to bring a lot of these basic issues into discussion within our farms. But I won't give you one, because there are 100 strategies that could be put into place, and it's up to each farm to decide which ones are they going to tackle first.
Yeah, and a lot of this is financial management. So I'm curious, financially, how does it play out, Simon, when butterfat goes up but protein stays flat under the 2026 pricing?
Yeah, so basically, if you're talking about butter fat going up, like in the P5 context, basically, but in both contexts, whether it's Western milking pool and P5, actually, you're basically reducing the amount of protein that you're delivering to the market. So basically, you have an opportunity for each kilo quota you have to deliver some protein. It used to be that protein you were not delivering back in 2021, 2023, those years, it was paid less than $3 per kilo. So, if you factor in how much it costs you, because protein doesn't just pop up like that, you need to feed your cows for it. So, it was not that big of a loss, if it was a loss at all. Nowadays, all of that protein is going to be paid maybe $10, $12 in P5 for a good chunk of it. Anybody who's got a ratio below 2.2. Out west, it's going to be still paid more than $7. And so basically, you're leaving on the table the opportunity to deliver some of that protein that could be paid what I would consider a profitable price. So that's what you're leaving on the table. Now, for some people, that it might bring into questions like, am I better off filling my quota quicker with more concentrated milk, less cows, that stuff, or delivering the protein that I can? It's an interesting question that it was not an issue before. It was a non-issue. Now it becomes an interesting question.
It all costs money, and I've started to hear that a lot of these strategies that you could do if you're very high-fat herd, with which I have no experience, you would have quite a bit of cost than trying to adjust your protein. So in chasing protein, where do you see producers unintentionally putting quota discipline at risk?
Well, yeah, like actually, that's the first thing I've been saying, like in all my interventions. It remains the most profitable thing to do is to fill your quota. There's no question to me that filling your quota should be number one. But then after that, the next question then becomes, how can I supply more protein with that same quota? And then, Rodrigo's talked about some management strategies. There's some feeding strategies also. Reducing protected fat or things like that, and maybe complementing with other ingredients in the line of what I was saying earlier. Reduce the fat only strategies and see if you can replace that with fat and protein type strategies. But filling your quota remains a priority number one.
Well, and as Simon says, Rodrigo, in terms of, some of that, day-to-day change, and you were talking about, nutritionally, I know for us, the plan had been, okay, let's remove all those strategies to try to increase fat. And right. Fat stayed the same when we pulled everything out. So great job. We were spending all the money on that. It's just one of those things that
at least you'll figure it out.
No, it's one of those things that it happens every time. It's always, I always laugh when I pull cows out of the herd and the milk tank stays the same, because now, right. There's more dry matter intake and all of that. So, but my understanding, and this is where I'd love for you to kind of give me a little more insight, is that feeding for protein is just more difficult. To try to push protein higher is just harder to do than it has been, with fat. Is that true, and why is that, Rodrigo?
Yeah, it's completely true, and I think you gave an excellent example there. And I'm probably going to start with fat. Fat yield and concentration is more malleable in terms of like the cow has different sources on how she makes the fat. So of course, she's doing the job to synthesize new fat at the mammary gland from what she ferments and what she receives from the rumen fermentation. But there is a good portion that is basically absorbed and packed as it was absorbed from the diet to the milk. So that's why the cow has a bigger diversity of sources to make fat. For protein, regardless if that's coming from our microbes or from the diet itself, the cow has to break those proteins down to amino acids and resynthesize it again in the mammary gland. So I think that's a little bit of biology or nutrition 101, but that explains why it's so hard to do it. And again, now that we're trying different strategies with some producers here, like you can see that it's a very slow process to even get 1 point more of protein. And you can really, it's very dependent of rumen fermentation. So here, forage quality, it's crucial. And sometimes we have the forage that we got last year, right? So now, if we want to change that part, probably we have to wait until these harvesting seasons to see how weather behaves and etc. So it's much harder. And Simon was saying something about that we've been discussing a lot is, okay, even if I increase protein, all the strategies that bring to more protein, rumen health, amino acid or protein balancing, all that also will bring some fat with it. They go together, right? So that's the real challenge. It's not only increasing protein, it's just increasing protein and probably decreasing fat. So that's a real challenge. But again, that's where not is just about one strategy only. Nutrition or management or genetics, it's different strategies that are complementary to each other that will really lead you to lead us to the expected outcomes.
Yeah, it's going to take some time for sure. So, Cindy, I understand from what you said earlier that fat and protein tend to rise together genetically, and I know this is not just in Canada that we're having this problem, because the United States is experiencing something very similar. Do breeders actually have any flexibility to shift the balance between fat and protein, or are we kind of just all going in the general direction here?
Yeah, I think they do. Like I said before, the two traits are genetically correlated. It's moderate, strong correlation. It's at 0.64. So it's positive, meaning that they will rise together, but it's not that strong that you don't have a choice when you're making your decision. For example, when we looked at the top 200 LPI sires, so LPI is our lifetime performance index that allows us to rank animals, do a first sort of animals, you will find some bulls that are very high for fat and lower for protein, or very high for protein and lower for fat. So it's also a question of identifying these animals that match where you want to go, your vision for the future. And like I said before, on the male side, but also for the females in your herd. So you may have some cows that also have this sort of perfect ratio you're looking for, and maybe you want to work more with these cows than some others, taking into account that there are also so many other characters you can select from genetically. But yeah, there are options there.
All right, folks. Well, this is a lot to digest. So we need to take a short break. We will be right back with more information and opportunities to, again, increase some of this income from the demand in protein. We'll be right back.
Strong and free. It's not just in our anthem, it's in who we are. A freedom to choose what's best for us. That's why Canadian dairy farmers uphold some of the highest standards in the world, proudly helping to strengthen our communities. When you choose Canadian, you're making all of us stronger.
That's the Canadian way.
And we're back with economist Simon Jeté-Nantel, dairy production expert Rodrigo Milano, and Cindy Jeton, the Director Genetics and Traceability, all three being experts from Lactanet. Cindy, before we even talk about breeding, can producers know whether or not they're near their herd's genetic ceiling for protein?
Sure. There's different tools that are available from AI, meaning artificial insemination companies. Your genetic advisor should have something that they can show you to help you see that. There's also a tool that we have that's called Compass that was built by Holstein Canada and Lactanet in partnership some years ago that can allow you to see where your genetic potential is. And as a benchmark relative to the other herds in Canada, and also where your phenotypic, your real production, let's say, is, if you're on milk recording, that is, of course. And then you can compare how your genetic ranks and your phenotype ranks, and then see if you have more room from a genetic standpoint or from a management environmental standpoint to make changes there. So yes, there are tools, and I think you should reach out to your genetic advisors or look out for these tools online to help you.
Now, I have to ask you one more question, Cindy, because this has been burning on my mind since the beginning of the episode, where you said the Holstein was rising at a 1.2 rate in butterfat. Jersey was 1.4, so they've got higher fat. I feel like we've left the other breeds out, and I hate to do that. Is there a magic breed that is full of protein for us?
Well, I don't think there's a magic breed, because in the end, you still want to fill your quota, have volumes. Different breeds have different volumes there, of course. So it all depends on what your vision is and what you want to work with. I haven't done the full analysis for all the other breeds to see really how the genetic was varying, but the most progress that we've seen has been for Holstein and Jersey, and it has been more divergent for Jersey than Holstein, let's say.
I didn't know if you'd tell me that like an Angus cross would have a lot of protein, because that would help me a lot in the shorter term, given how many crossbred cows I have. But we'll save that. So those are long term. Rodrigo, we've talked a little bit about this, but is there a quick shortcut here in terms of rumen health, starch availability? There's been talk of amino acids being added. I know there were trials years ago in terms of some of those types of things. What's some of that research look like? Is it something for producers to benefit a shift in the short term with some of that kind of stuff?
Well, you mentioned all them, and I think all of them could be potentially a short-term strategy, but at the same time, not for all farms could be their first strategy. So I think, as I discussed with my peers Simon and Cindy, I think the first probably leverage or action to do as a farm in a farm perspective is put all our heads together from your advisors, from even your peers, your neighbors, and see, hey, what are you doing? And particularly on your farm, say, okay, what are my opportunities now? Again, probably rumen health. It's a base, nutritional speaking, one of the base. But again, you probably don't have the forage right now to do anything. So then you go to the next one and to the next one. Still, probably doing everything possible in this coming harvest season to make the best forage possible. But again, the one short term, it's for you and your advisors to really find out. That's how good of a response I can give you right now, honestly.
So if I ask what's going to give us the best ROI right away in the first year, you don't have the answer?
I let Simon answer that.
Honestly, I think Andrew is the one that found the answer. If you can take away protected fat and nothing happens to your fat content and the health of your cows and anything, I didn't know if you ran the numbers on that, Andrew, but I think the ROI must be pretty high. No, I mean, as Rodrigo was mentioning, on paper, the one that has the highest ROI is if you can take out something like protected fat and then replace it, and then with strategies to improve rumen health and all those other things, and say, okay, I can boost protein and fat. That's probably the one that's going to give you the most. Anything that could increase protein would be good, but as we said, it's not that realistic. What else? Increasing milk volume can be great as well. There are different strategies. Rodrigo mentioned them. And also, the other thing is I'll talk a little bit about the genetic aspect, because I think I like to bring an investment analogy to it. Basically, Andrew was mentioning early on, like his selection was focusing on fat pretty much. That was the main criteria. You could turn it around and take a kind of a wild investment and say, like, I'm turning it around and favoring all my cows that produce more protein and try to find bulls that do so. Then to me, you'd be you'd be betting on the protein market long term, which we still have some questions about it. So it'd be an investment, but a high risk investment. But I think there are some lower risk investment, which is like just putting a floor in terms of what's the minimum protein yield you're willing to accept from your cows and from the bulls you're selecting. And so basically, to me, there's a range there, like in terms of genetics. Do I want to bet the house on protein and go all in? Or do I want to at least just put a floor and take a much more managed risk on that side? On that, it's up to every producers to decide how risk averse they are and to decide what they believe about where the protein market will be 5, 8, 10 years from now.
Well, then, since I have you, Simon, at my disposal, I'm going to give you the example that our nutrition team has come up with. It's half joking, mind you, but it's also somewhat reasonable, because once we get into summer, heat comes in, and our fat always drops a point or two every time. So my nutritionist has said he has a great idea coming on the first hot day of the summer that he will implement, and then we'll realize a lower fat. Basically because they'll be under heat stress and the fat will drop naturally. But he's going to take credit for that. But for sure. So it's one of those that in reality, what we're actually doing is triticale is going to come off in another month. We're not going to make a whole lot of changes. Triticale is going to come in May. It increases milk, lowers fat typically. We'll have to add a few cows to fill that quota, as you said, was kind of, job number one. Do you think my strategy makes sense? Get a little more milk, lower the fat a little bit, even if it takes a few more cows to do it?
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive to the dairy economists that have been for more than 10 years now. Like we've always, we always think, and I'm sure most of the people and producers are listening, like it's never been a good economic advice to say like, I'll produce the same quota, same milk with more cows. You'd always want to have less cows. That being said, the current economic context might change that. And, so we've looked at that, at the, how it adds up. And to me, there are two things that help support having additional cows. It's first the protein you can deliver in addition, which are, as we talked about, well paid for. The other thing is the fact that the beef market is so high. And then if, the calves and the cull cows that, having whatever, it's two more cows, 5 or 10, there's going to be more calves, more cull cows, and the beef market being what it is right now will help support those cows. So those two things combined together make it so that it can become interesting. Now, to me, it's if and only if. First of all, you have room for it. It's not every producer that has room in their barn to add more cows. You just alluded to that earlier in one of your comments where you're saying, like, sometimes you would take a cow out and the bull tank would stay the same because, and so if you're in that situation, you can add as many more cows as you'd want and you're not improving anything. The other thing is do you have the labor and do you have the forages for it? I mean, if you answer yes to those three questions, to me, then you should put pen to paper and start computing, okay, if I have to buy 1, 2, 3 cows, let's say $5,000, or if I sell less cows that I could have sold $4 or $5,000, am I going to get the additional protein and is that going to pay for it? And so far, the calculations have done hint that in many cases, the answer will be yes.
So operationally, and you've started in on the operational side of it here a bit, but on farm, we've got a lot of operational decisions to make this work, especially like in a jurisdiction like mine where we've been, we're kind of land cramped, we're facility cramped, you're kind of running everything as full as you can to still meet the code and do what you want to do. Yeah. In practical terms, Rodrigo, I'm interested in the conditions, like we've mentioned space, forage, and labor, but when you start having to invest in those things to make this successful, I've heard numbers thrown around like $10,000 a stall for cows to build something new here. What kind of factors are farmers looking at? I mean, on the podcast, we often talk about animal care, about animal welfare, about all of the things we need to do to deliver proaction in the way that you would expect. So if we're now producing more milk and milking more cows, what kind of factors are we going to be looking at on farm?
Yeah, I think Simon and even Andrew alluded to it just now. Like we definitely, if we're having more cows, we just need more number of cows, but more cows that are well housed and well fed as well. So that's again comes into play to say, well, if I don't have the extra room and the extra forage, well, probably is not a consideration that will go for me. And again, probably this strategy of producing, decreasing water fat and adding just more cows. The alternative could be instead of reducing fat, but probably increasing the milk volume per cow. So each cow still produces the same amount kilograms of butter fat, but in a different way, just in a more diluted way on the fat side, while we still try to increase the protein. So I think that will be an extra consideration to that scenario, but would definitely I reemphasize in that scenario of adding more cows, they have to be well housed and well fed, because again, it's a complex decision there that, as you alluded to, has to go with the animal care and other requests we have as dairy farmers.
Because I think one of the challenges we do have is obviously we've seen this demand growing over the last couple of years, definitely highlighted by, a couple of changes in terms of, consumer trends and availability to things like GLP-1s and, a whole bunch of different factors. And I think, Cindy, I think we've all actually talked about it in terms of, the risk of going all in on something like this when we don't really know, what the long-term impact is going to be. So I guess, Rodrigo, is how risky do you think some of these protein-focused adjustments are going to be? When, and I guess how confident are you that this is going to stick around? How do we manage that risk?
Well, I still don't have my crystal ball functioning 100%, but I think all that we have been discussing here, and again, I don't think that the question is if the market is going to change, is when and how it's going to change. But all the strategies we've been discussing right now, building and balancing our genetic potential for producing more milk solids, both protein and fat, just balancing those, mastering forage quality, optimizing rumen health, and all the other strategies out there will really foster the resilience of our herd and allow it to really, when the change comes, adapt better to it. I think now we're probably in a bad position because we, as Simon alluded to, we focus so much on fat that probably we forgot about the possibility of having an increasing demand for protein. But I think we should learn from that and just prepare. As what Simon was saying, like it's an low risk investment just to have establish our base on genetics and management side, so we can in the future respond better to these changing demands.
Well, and this genetic changing stuff takes time. So, Cindy, in terms of a hedging strategy, you might call it, how should producers plan breeding programs when market signals aren't guaranteed to last forever?
Yeah, I think going back to what we said already, keeping a more balanced approach, and I really like Simon's way of putting it as a portfolio of investment. Each bull you select is like an investment you make. So deciding where you want to go, and if you believe, and I wish I also had a crystal ball like Rodrigo, but that protein is the way to go for the next 10 years, then sure, you can go all in on protein, but I still think a balanced approach is less risky to be able to better maneuver the changes that will be coming, because there will be more for sure. And I've been asked some questions from people about 30 years ago, and for most of it, I was like, I wasn't even born, so I'm not sure what happened then. But, so apparently there's been these waves in the past of more protein, now more fat, normal protein. So it's just keeping them both in mind as we make these decisions that are for the longer term.
A lot of different strategies out there for sure. So for producers who are considering doing nothing, Simon, what's the risk over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, of course, as I said in the first question you addressed to me, what does it mean that we need to adapt? As is always the case. So, the market just changed. We're being asked to adapt, and the market will change, and we will be asked to adapt to other things. And it's always the same story. People that do not adapt, they take a step back, if you want. Like everybody else will move forward, will try to take advantage of the opportunities that are there, and they will benefit from it. And anybody that doesn't adapt, basically, you're slowly going towards the back of the peloton, if you want. And so, I mean, it's not the end of the world if you don't adapt exactly right on the spot this month to this change. But taking a habit of not adapting to market signals is usually a bad omen for the future and the durability of your herd.
You're probably getting to the back of the peloton because you didn't have enough dairy protein trying to keep up with the
That's
peloton. I think
true.
that's probably the problem. So,
But yeah, if I can add, like I was listening to Rodrigo and Cindy, and to me, you know, one of the key things to think about is like, you know, I hear Rodrigo talking about rumen health and basically all those basic good things that can help you just have more productive cows overall, and just a good thing. And from a purely management point of view, because, you know, it's a bigger challenge, the protein challenge is bigger than the fat challenge was. And there's such a variety of possible strategies and answers. Having a good team, Rodrigo mentioned it, but having a good team around you, a team that can have constructive comments with each other, is also just sound management, and I think will pay off to face the current challenge of protein. And it's also good, just like rumen health, in terms of management, I think it's just a good thing to have moving forward.
well, you know what? That actually leads into my next question, because it was going to be kind of that like closing piece of advice for everyone. Simon, it sounds like yours is, you know, surround yourself with good people, you know, get the best information, and so you can make the best decisions.
And also make sure you have the tools. Like there's a bunch of tools out there, I know, to basically assess the merit of the different strategies and be able to track the progress you're making. As an economist, a dairy economist, I will talk about feed margins. Can you track that to see, like, are you moving in the right direction? But those are the kind of things that you need with the rest of it, to discuss of things and have some objective data to talk about with your team.
Cindy, what about you? What's your closing piece of advice?
Yeah, well, surrounding yourself was also on my list of things, but assessing your situation to see where you're at right now, and understanding where you want to go. And I guess, yeah, using the tools and using the information that's available. I just want to mention that I forgot at the beginning, today is proof day for us. So the new genetic evaluations have been updated this morning at 8 a.m. And we have many articles that are available on the website to look into, and one of them is about fat and protein. But we've been also adjusting our two national selection indexes, so LPI and ProDollar, to account for these market changes. So they are relevant and can be useful as a first criteria of selection, maybe to find some animals that rank well. So yeah, look at the information that's available out there, and consider the long-term vision for genetics.
Rodrigo, what about you?
Sure. Well, other than surrounding yourself with your advice and stuff like that, I think the first one is don't freak out, right? Like, I think we should really see what is the opportunity there. Take the time again to put numbers into paper. See what is possible. Plan again. Many of these strategies will be played out in the fields, in the crop this coming season. So you just do your homework there, and yeah, just take the opportunity to rethink again this new situation is opportunity to rethink the basic of dairy production. So let's see what opportunities are embedded there for go there and build your plan and apply it rigorously. So you can get results and measure results.
Saw some solid advice there. If we could just all get her down by 0.1, I think that would be a good place to start when it comes to butterfat. If you start looking at our collective impact, it's a lot less overwhelming, I think, than each individual farm. But of course, we all have the responsibility on farm to manage accordingly. So Simon Jeté-Nantel, Rodrigo Milano, and Cindy Jeton, thank you so much for joining us on the Canadian Podcast to talk all about protein.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, Sarah, it definitely sounds like protein is not, from my perspective, I do think that it's not just a passing trend, that it is definitely a part of kind of the strategic conversation on Canadian dairy farms and Canadian dairy policy, all of that thing, as consumers do, kind of not necessarily change the way they shop, but kind of increase that protein that they are, and it's having some real impact across the industry.
Yeah, I like how today it showed up with our guests, though, that there's so much opportunity. There's no real one-size-fits-all solution, and the right response really depends on our herds, our genetics, our facilities, and feed supply, labor. I'm hearing a lot about chop length in my house. Chop length is a big talk. So there's so many things you can do to influence it, and we're just going to really need the chance to try to see what works, what doesn't, and have that willingness to stick with it.
Well, it always is that, that kind of initial that this is the thing to focus on. And so we try to do, kind of change all at once. And how are we going to change and how are we going to impact? The exciting challenge is always that it depends on what the girls in the barn want to do. And I think that's going to just be kind of the interesting one, is that maybe it means some fine tuning. Maybe it means something a little long term. Maybe it means a little bit of all of it. We just kind of have to take little steps at a time.
Yep, there's a lot of takeaways here, but I would say the new pricing system doesn't just demand immediate, drastic moves. It does reward thoughtful, informed decision-making, kind of a more holistic approach, looking at, what should the right balance be for us going forward, not just in the context of the protein chaos right now, but in the dairy industry in general.
A big thanks to our guests today. The three were from Lactanet. It was Simon Jeté-Nantel, Rodrigo Milano, and Cindy Jeton for helping break down the economics, the biology, and of course the long-term implications of this protein shift. If this conversation helps spark questions about your own operation, that's exactly the point. So keep the conversation going on Blue Sky, X, Facebook, and YouTube, or drop us a note at the email podcast@canadianpodcow.ca.
And as always, a big thanks to our sponsor, Dairy Farmers of Canada, and a huge thank you to our production team, Bruce Sargent and Carl Belanger. Also, thanks to all of you for listening. And until next time, I'm Sarah Sash, and this is my buddy,
Andrew Campbell. See you, folks.